It's not possible that the worker who installed that sign with the street name can't afford to live on this street. The most beautiful city in Mexico and one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Look, it feels like a fairy tale to walk around here like you're in a Disney movie where the princess is going to marry the prince in a palace. But it's also the most gentrified city in Mexico. Let's start by defining what gentrification is in the simplest way. Gentrification is when poor people can no longer afford to live in a place where they used to be able to. It's that simple. Gentrification happens in steps. You have a society, neighborhood, or city of any economic level. And that city for some reason becomes desirable or attractive for other people to come, whether it's because it's a tourist spot, because it's beautiful, because it has some natural resource or something, it's attracting other people to come. Those people who come usually have more purchasing power than the ones who live there. They arrive, rent houses, buy houses, consume and pay for services. The local population at first benefits from this economic spillover and sells things to them, rents rooms to them. But little by little, as these people pay more for a service, other investors come, buy the local businesses, remodel them, buy the hotels, and remodel them. And so the price gradually goes up. And the more tourists arrive, the higher the prices get. And the people who live there can no longer afford to live there. Gentrification is a phenomenon where people have to leave their hometown, their birthplace, the street where they grew up, because the rents on that street are way above their salary. Gentrification, although at first it seems to be something inevitable, a natural consequence of tourism, is not actually so. It can be avoided and it is very harmful and destructive, since it makes a city completely lose its essence. Let's look at some examples of this from around the world. Venice turned into a theme park and the locals for the most part were displaced or became employees of that theme park, having to put on a park costume to please the tourists without making ends meet, to live in that park where they work. Just like Disney employees, they don't live in the park. But in the case of the Venetian, that park where he works used to be his home. Barcelona, where the locals gang up on tourists because they're so fed up. We see similar things in Bali, Kyoto, Phuket, the list goes on. And as I've told you many times, when we have destructive phenomena like these, the first to pay the price is the poor. It's the lower classes, those with the lowest income, who suffer first. Here, with gentrification, it's the most necessary jobs, but the ones that pay less that are leaving first. Have you seen that game of Jenga, where you have all these wooden pieces, and the goal is to remove pieces without knocking down the tower? By common sense, you start by removing pieces that don't bear much weight, that aren't key to the structure, right? Well, with gentrification, you're doing the opposite. When a city has such a high cost of living, the first ones to leave are those who support the weight of the city. Those working hands that contribute to all the crucial tasks in these towns are the ones who leave first. Look, here in the downtown area, it's perfectly normal to only see businesses and establishments, people having breakfast, perfectly normal, nothing's going on. The blocks adjacent to downtown, it's perfectly normal for them to have more businesses than homes, and for the homes that are there, it's still okay for there to be tourists, but not for them to be the most expensive, and for you to hear more English than Spanish when you walk down the street. It's okay, it's understandable, but once it gets to a certain point, once you're on the outskirts of the city, like here I am on the outskirts, and I'm looking and I can't find any available housing, that's when you have a problem. The local workforce, which is essential for the city, has to leave the city and they have to commute to the city every day. This causes congestion and pollution and a low quality of life for those who keep the city running. A tourist comes and can afford to stay, to eat, to drive, to have fun, and tourists will always come. But the ones they're pushing out first are the baker, the worker, the cleaner, the washer, and they're the ones we need the most. This is the hotel where I'm staying. Look, those over there are houses, private houses. Here there used to be houses. They demolished houses like those to build this hotel. Each room has a private terrace. Here is my room. All of this is a private terrace. The room up here has its own private terrace. Look, each room has a private terrace. This is gentrification. Here, you're paying between 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pesos per night. This space, this land where I'm standing, should have been used to build homes for Guanajuato families. But well, look, there's already this luxury hotel and I'm part of it. By staying here, I came at the last minute. I couldn't find any available rooms. This was the only room I found there. And what was it that attracted so many people? Well, in the case of San Miguel de Allende, it was the beauty of its streets. If you've had the chance to come, you'll see that any street you walk on looks like something out of a fairy tale, like a city designed for some magical video game. Very beautiful. But in many cases, this beauty of the towns works against them and they completely lose their essence. Look, I came here for a wedding and I was the only Mexican among all the guests, the only one. And I thought, oh well, it's because the people getting married aren't Mexican. But then I started going to the restaurants, the streets, the markets, and I saw that Mexicans were either half the population or the minority. In some places they only spoke English, and that's not even counting the tourists. I'm talking about places where people who live here go. In fact, approximately 10% of San Miguel de Allende are foreigners, mostly from the United States, Canada, or Europe. Now you as a property owner, would you rent to a Mexican for an average fair price, or would you rent to a gringo for double the price? You know he's not going to haggle with you. Let's look at all these streets and you'll see that there are no families living here anymore. All these buildings were originally built as homes for Mexicans from San Miguel de Allende, but nowadays everyone has left and only businesses remain. All the rooms are hotels at 2,000 pesos a night, and the businesses downstairs are restaurants where breakfast costs 500 pesos. Which brings us to the point that even tourism can no longer be average tourism. Now it has to be tourism for people who are a bit above the middle class. Local Mexican tourists can no longer really afford to come here to San Miguel de Allende. Now you have to be not only from a developed country like Canada, the United States or Europe, but also from a class above the middle class, even in those developed countries. And that's the final stage, the last nail in the coffin of gentrification. As a result, the city has almost no industry, almost zero production, everything is service, the city depends on tourists. In fact, when I was here, I saw more bilingual schools or English schools for the children of foreigners than factories or workshops. And what's going on there? Well, the brands that those middle, upper and higher class people from developed countries consume, they identify these places and set up establishments here of the brands they use. And that's the final step to finish driving out the local population and turning these towns practically into a luxury shopping center with luxury brands for the people who can afford them. Therefore, by definition, this is no longer a community. You can no longer call it a society where you know your neighbors, help each other, and your children grow up together. It's practically a theme park. That problem that the most popular European cities have been facing for decades has finally caught up with us. Yes, now we finally have first world problems. Now we just need to become first world. Well, we're not there yet, not yet, but we're on our way. When a city reaches this level of gentrification, it's like it's shooting itself in the foot. Because its most essential workers can no longer afford to rent here, they have to come from outside looking for cheaper rents, and you have to give them an incentive to come all the way here, a higher salary, which affects the consumer. And this creates that chain reaction, where every time you go to a place to buy something, that place needs a worker who can no longer afford to live here. Therefore, prices have to go up, and little by little they keep rising, until we end up with the most gentrified city in Mexico. And this has happened from one level to another in every Pueblo Mágico in Mexico, not just San Miguel de Allende. This is just the worst case. There are 177 pueblos mágicos spread across the 31 states of Mexico. All of them have some kind of gentrification, and I know that the intention behind creating the Pueblos Mágicos program was good. The campaign originally aimed to stimulate the local economy by boosting tourism and to show the world the beauty of Mexico. But with the good, well, that's where the bad good came in. And what measures are there to help with gentrification? What can be done? Well, there are several things. First, this is my opinion. If I were the mayor of one of these gentrified magic towns, this is what I would do. A subsidy for essential workers, meaning if you work in a business or industry that's essential for this city, you receive a rent subsidy, you pay less. Or a minimum number of houses that can only be rented to locals, which are already set aside, and from before they're even built. It's determined here. It's only for San Miguel de Allendeses or residents of the state. Just like Xcaret, where you get a discount with your Quintana Roo license, the same way but with housing. For example, if you're the driver of this bus that brings snacks to the city, a subsidy so you can afford to live here. If you're the taxi driver, if you work in sanitation services, that lady over there who's working watering the plants, all these people come from far away to work here. They shouldn't have to come from far away, they should live right here. There are many ways to avoid or reduce, or at least slow down gentrification. For example, setting limits on the number of visitors, incentives to visit outside of peak seasons. But the foundation, the cornerstone to fight gentrification is housing. The houses in a town have to be for the people of that town. Whoever buys and rents the houses will determine whether the place becomes gentrified or not and how quickly it will gentrify. So heads up, now we know the key is to control housing. And so life goes on in the most beautiful and most gentrified city in Mexico. We have more tourists arriving every day, more local people leaving because they can no longer afford to live here. Every day we have more tourists arriving, more gringos buying houses. That's my report. May courage be with you and see you next time.